state wildlife. Updated every 10 years was last updated. So that was quite a lot, but that doesn't include the DNR updates. So sorry, I'm not under time.
No, that was hugely helpful and a good summary of the legislative session. Yeah.
On the Colorado River, interim guidelines, what, is there a deadline for the lower to implement?
So I believe that the Bureau of Reclamation will be sort of finalizing the options for their analysis this coming fall, winter. A final decision is likely, 6 months or more prior to 2026, because there needs time to actually implement the guidelines. Interim steps between there, I think I don't have that.
You were at the last meeting, the 7 states, were they congenial? Was it?
It was a very congenial, it was a public appearance of the 6 of the 7 state principal negotiators in Boulder last week. The Bureau of Reclamation was there speaking. Governor made an appearance. It was a very congenial, direct conversation about sort of the state of negotiations.
Who was missing?
The Wyoming principal negotiator was in Boulder, but was sick and could not come to the panel.
Bummer.
So they traveled and intended to be there. It was not.
All right, thank you so much. Appreciate you again, Nate. All right, we will move along to our business items. We are first the staff report, I think I can summarize as the staff is very, very busy, is what my takeaway from that. Elliot, do you have more to add to that?
I can just give a couple quick highlights. Obviously, you have a staff report, you've read it, very specific questions. I think it's important to state that, the 9-month period ending March 31st, 2024, revenues totaled 139 million. This is 20% decrease, and that is basically because of gas prices. We're very dependent on that, as we all know. We are very conscious of that, but just to acknowledge that publicly.
Natural gas prices.
Yes. I would like to celebrate the fact that we had 2 people participating in the leadership program at University of Denver. DNR has a big presence there. We try to send people every year. We had Mariah Parker, district manager, who you hear from frequently, and solid minerals manager Ben Teschner, who you also hear from frequently. They both attended. It's a rigorous program, and they participated in, and that was an excellent. We're happy to see that it went well. Just announcements for people maybe listening. 3-day intensive grazing seminar. We talked a lot on the tour about how we try to educate lessees and so forth. So that is coming up July 10th through 12th. People can, our lessees can apply for that. It's going to be held at Lowry Ranch, and so the trainers can be part of that. And then I think if there's anything else that I wanted to call out for you. I think that's about it for now, but if there were any questions about the staff report that anybody had, let me know.
Great, thank you. Appreciate all the work that's going on. All right, we're going to move on to final action items. In our first is A. Steve, I see you on, there you are. We can see you.
Okay?
Can you hear us?
I can hear you all, but as you know, you're coming
Okay,
in
we
and out.
can't
But
hear you.
Well, let's figure this out.
He's talking.
Commissioner Clark, can you hear me?
Steve, we can't hear you at all. And one more time, Steve.
There we go. We got you.
Just gotta flip the switches in the same direction. It works.
Uh-huh. All right, Steve, you're up.
Can you all hear me now? Just double checking.
Yes, yes.
Perfect. And I'm gonna share my screen, so let me know if that works as well.
Fingers crossed in the rain, please.
Okay.
Says I'm sharing, so hopefully you can see it.
Yes,
Yeah.
we can.
Perfect. With that, good morning. Again, my name is Steve Fries. I'm the minerals field specialist. Also online today is Corey Neighbors with Bison for Properties Colorado. If you have any additional questions for him. And hopefully you can see my slides switching, just double check
Yes.
real. Perfect. Here today to discuss a surface use agreement or a proposed surface use agreement. As a reminder, surface use agreement is an oil and gas contract where an operator constructs the location on a pad that will develop offsite minerals. With horizontal development, surface use agreements or SUAs became more common. And leases generally do not allow for a surface location to develop minerals that aren't being developed directly underneath the oil and gas pad. In this case, Bison is proposing to develop 100% private minerals from a state land board owned surface. And per the oil and gas development policy, any pad that will develop less than 10% state minerals must go to the board for approval, which is why I am here today. The proposed surface use agreement is located approximately 17 miles east of Eaton in Weld County. Zooming in a bit more, this map shows the state land board ownership in orange. The proposed pad location is highlighted with the red arrow. And the proposed development area for the operator is outlined in this blue. The location was selected in part to avoid the mapped high priority habitat, which is shown as in yellow. The high priority habitat is due to mule deer, severe and critical winter range. There is also a ferruginous hawk nest located near Crow Creek, which runs along 392 here. The pipeline takeaway for this pad is off to the east of the state land board land. And so by utilizing lands on the state land board surface, the operator was able to avoid crossing this wildlife habitat with their pipeline and also avoid crossing Highway 392 here. Again, zooming in a bit more to our section. Again, the proposed pad is highlighted by this red arrow. The proposed pad will use an existing oil and gas lease road, which is pretty faint, but you can roughly see it on this section here, to access this new pad. The yellow dots indicate existing oil and gas wells that were drilled by another operator, with the purple lines showing the horizontal well bores of each of these wells, and then the purple dots at the bottom indicating the bottom hole location. What's important to note here is that the state land board minerals have been completely developed with horizontal wells, and that our existing oil and gas lessee did not have objections to this proposed surface use agreement. I included this chart just to highlight our general SUA process. Again, this is being presented because this falls into a tier 3 of our SUA calculator, which, as you can see, is just to be determined across the board. And that's because the board reserved authority or specific authority to hear and approve any SUA that developed less than or equal to 10% minerals. Again, in this case, this lease will develop no state minerals. The proposed disturbance payment for this SUA will be $183,500 upfront for the well pad and the existing road. This payment was determined based on a charge of $10,000 per acre for the well pad and a charge of $5,000 per acre for the existing access road. Assuming all 10 wells that the operator has proposed are drilled, the land board will receive an additional payment of $100,000, which is calculated at a rate of $10,000 per well. And this payment would be due following the spud of each well. The annual rental payment would begin on the first anniversary date and for as long as this SUA is in effect. This annual rental is based on a charge, on a per acre charge, and would be initially set at $16,600 per year. As part of the SUA process, the land board reaches out to each of the lines of business and CPW Based on those comments, the land board will be including some wildlife stipulations that were previously mentioned regarding the mule deer habitat as well as the ferruginous hawk. These wildlife stipulations end up in the lease and also as included within the ECMC permitting process. A class 3 cultural survey will be required prior to any disturbance. If any items are located, then additional consultation with the State Historic Preservation Office and the land board will occur. A wetland survey has already been performed by H2E Incorporated and found no wetlands within 1,000 feet of the proposed pad. And a requirement will be included within the lease to consult with the district manager, myself, and any other land board folks regarding the reclamation and any seed mixes when reclamation occurs. With that, staff is recommending that the board approve issuing a surface use agreement to Bison for Properties Colorado at the rate outlined in the cover sheet. With that, I am available for questions or comments that you may have. Also, again, Corey Neighbors should hopefully be joining online with us to answer any questions as well. And I hope all of that came through.
Yeah, yes.
Corey is on if the board has any questions for the
Okay.
board.
Any questions, comments from commissioners? I am not seeing any. We can go ahead and open this to public comment. If there's someone who would like to comment on this.
Or folks listening along online, if you wanted to make a comment to the board, use the raise hand feature. We'll bring you to the floor so that you can make your comment.
And we're certainly glad to hear from Bison 4 folks, if they'd like to share any perspective, but you don't have to.
No, I'd just like to, thank everybody for their time and thanks Steve for the presentation. And again, if there are any questions with our development plan or kind of timelines, I'm happy to answer what I can.
Appreciate that.
No comments, no hand raised from the public.
Okay, very good. We do have a board order in front of us and in our packet if there is a motion.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I move that the board adopt Bison for Properties Colorado LLC surface use agreement as contained in the board packet of June 13th.
thank you. And we have a motion, Commissioner Heath, a second, Commissioner Frobe. We will call a vote. Commissioner Frobe?
Yes.
Commissioner Heath?
Yes.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner Chavez? And the chair votes yes, that passes 5-0. Thanks, Steve, for being online with us today.
Thank you all.
All right, we are going to move along to item B. We will be hearing from Ben. And we're talking about no surface occupancy Pueblo County.
Good morning, commissioners. Before I start trying to share my screen, can you hear me okay?
Yes, so far so good.
So far, so good. That's great.
Mhm.
All right. Let's see what we can do here. Okay. All right. Are you able to see my slides as you would expect to see them?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. Good morning, commissioners. For the record, this is Ben Teschner, the Solid Minerals Manager. And one of the things that falls into my remit is no surface occupancy agreements. And this particular one is down in Pueblo County with a surface owner called S-Bar Ranch, who is also our agricultural lessee on neighboring property. And for the benefit of a solar project on that property with AES Solar. And I believe Eric Anderson from AES is on the line, should we have any questions for him. Oops, hold on. So the idea with these no surface occupancy agreements is that we're monetizing mineral only estate. And of course, when we hold split estate where we own the minerals only, there are a handful of ways we can monetize it. One of them is to develop those minerals. And the other, another one is a no surface occupancy agreement like this one. So what I want to go into briefly after we discuss where this is located is talk about what these no surface occupancy agreements are and why the parties involved would like to do them. This particular one would be located in central Pueblo County, near where a lot of solar development is going on right now, and would be for the benefit, as I said, of a solar development. We do no surface occupancy agreements only in cases where the board owns only the minerals. This is important because mineral estate in Colorado is considered dominant. Therefore, as a mineral only holder, we have some rights to access the surface for the purposes of developing our minerals. A no surface occupancy agreement is when, as the mineral holder, we agree not to exercise that right. And the surface owner compensates the mineral owner for foregoing that privilege, or foregoing that right, I suppose. And so in this case, the AES and SBAR Ranch have come to us and said, we would like to put solar panels on this surface, and we would like to mitigate the risk that you as the mineral owner will want to develop the minerals in the future and then occupy the surface and cause us to relocate or remove panels for that purpose. So let's look a little bit at the landscape of where this would be located. This is down to orient you, I guess, a little to this map. North, sort of the north end of this map is the city of Pueblo. And you can see these sort of this sort of gridded looking gray is where there's already existing solar development in this area. And you can see more of it over here. Can you guys see my cursor?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. So you can see it up toward Pueblo here. And then you can see more of it kind of moving down over in this particular area. The no surface, excuse me, on the left in the orange is our GCC limestone and cement mining lease. This is a property the board may remember touring a couple of years ago. And that's important because when we're going to talk about the mineral potential of these properties in a moment, and that GCC lease features prominently in that analysis. The purple that you see is on state land board surface and minerals, right? So this is, but importantly for this case, the state land board surface. And this is the Rocky Mountain Solar Phase 2 planning lease. This is with AES, who is the same, who is a party to this, to the no surface occupancy being proposed today. But this would be the Phase 2 solar operation of related to this NSO. So the NSO makes way for Phase 1 on SBAR Ranch to the north. Phase 2 would be on state land board. The NSO will be located here, just north of that purple solar planning lease. And again, this is privately owned surface, state land board minerals, where there would be the Phase 1 of this solar project. When deciding whether staff will recommend a no surface occupancy agreement, there are a number of questions. Perhaps the most fundamental one is, what mineral potential do we think we're stranding by entering into this agreement, and what do we think that's worth? Staff looked at an analysis of this property. We have no oil and gas potential to speak of. We do not believe there are any metals or coal potential to speak of. However, there is substantial limestone potential on this property. And limestone is a mineral that in almost all cases is developed from the surface. It's not an underground mined product given its given how it's sort of geologically formed, its value, all these sorts of things. And so we would be foregoing for the period of this NSO the opportunity to develop the limestone on this property. We do believe that GCC, for example, our lessee to the west, has plenty of resources available for them, and that although there is substantial limestone here, there are challenges to developing it, given that it is on split estate. There's also some sand and gravel mining potential here, and as the board knows, sand and gravel is reserved as part of the State Land Board's mineral estate. So this would be another potential resource that we would be stranding for the period of this NSO. Again, there are neighboring parcels that we may be able to use for this should a lessee approach us looking for sand and gravel, and there would be challenges to developing this given that it is split estate as well. So accepting that those resources exist on this mineral property, the pricing for this NSO goes sort of above and beyond our standard pricing scheme. The first 10 years are priced at $10 per acre per year. And it's important to note here that our NSOs are all paid up front as a standard way we've done business with these for certainly as long as I've been here, and quite a bit further into the past as well. The base price we have for all of our NSOs of any type, regardless of mineral potential, is $5 per acre per year. And we've added a premium of $5, an additional $5 per acre per year to account for the limestone and sand and gravel potential we see on these properties. As the board has approved in the past, we have also included a 1.5x addition on years beyond 20 years. So in this case, years 21 through 30 would then be priced at $15 per acre per year. When you do all that math for 30 years over 2,240 acres, you get to $784,000 paid up front. Staff believe that this is reasonably compensates the board for the loss of this mining potential over the course of this 30 years, and appropriately makes way for projects with a solar lessee on property just to the south of us as well. So staff is recommending that the board approve this 30-year NSO with SBAR Ranches on the 2,240 acres of mineral-only property in Pueblo County at the price of $784,000, all paid upfront. And here's the board order for your convenience.
We have questions or comments from
Just Commissioner Heath, small item, Ben, but you said in your statements it would be the first 10 years, but your slide says first 20 years. And I'm assuming you mean the first 20 years, just to correct.
I do mean the first 20. I apologize for misspeaking there. Yes,
Commissioner Probe?
Yes.
Ben, thank you for the fairly comprehensive write-up on this. I just want to make sure I'm understanding it. If you'll go back to your map.
Mm-hmm.
The subject area is the brown with the yellow line, right? The NSO?
Yes, the subject area is, can you see, if you can see my cursor, is this area
Yes.
here ringed in yellow.
And then I'm confirming, I think that you said, and here in my packet it's blue, but the State Land Board owns the surface on purple in your slide, and it's currently leased to AES for a solar.
Correct. It's at least under a planning lease to AES, which does not guarantee that it will become a production lease, but it is part of their future solar development plans, yes.
Okay, and that's the surface on that, and
Correct.
we have minerals under those lands.
We certainly do.
We do, and those might also offer generally limestone and sand and gravel possibilities.
Yes, they certainly would, and it's a little more complicated discussion than we probably want to get into now, but the thrust of it is the finances are fundamentally different when we own the surface and the minerals, both for the potential for mining, but also when we're compensated for solar development, we're compensated at quite a bit different rate.
Right.
On our surface. So all these
Okay,
sorts of
I just want to
factor
clarify
into
my
the
understanding.
decision-making.
That's great. So the only other thing I have on this really is, the flag generally, at least before, or the issue before, and then this one, wondering, if we should, as an agent, organization, look at smoothing of revenues and question $750,000 from a net present value perspective is fantastic, right? But as we look at trying to smooth revenue curves and look into the future of this order of magnitude, I find myself thinking, 10 years from now, would we not be grateful for some annual revenue? So nothing to discuss
Yeah.
today, but something to discuss.
We've
strategically.
certainly seen that before.
We have. So anyway, it seemed like a good
Yeah.
time for us to maybe think
Yeah.
about that.
I appreciate that perspective.
Then, I assume there's provisions if the solar panels are gonna stay beyond 30 years.
There's not. If that occurs, then if this goes to 30 years, then we will have to make some sort of decisions. It's certainly at the 30-year and 1-day mark, the board would have the right to lease this for mineral development, regardless of what's happening on the surface, and occupy the surface per the reasonable accommodation doctrine of how these split estates work.
Thank you.
All right, I'm not seeing other questions or comments. We will open this to public comment. So Nick, if you want to do that for us.
Yeah, folks listening along online, if you want to make a comment, use the raise hand feature. We'll find something interesting to talk about for 15 seconds or so. while we-
And of course, we're glad to hear from Eric Anderson if they'd like to do so.
Commissioner, no hands raised.
Okay. With that, we do have a board order in our packet. And would need a motion.
This is Commissioner Chavez, I move we approve the no surface occupancy lease 116677 as described in the board package.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion, Commissioner Chavez, second Commissioner Rowe. We will call a vote. Commissioner Chavez,
Yes.
Commissioner Clark,
Yes.
Commissioner Heath,
Yes.
Commissioner Frobe,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes, that passes 5-0. Thank you, Ben. Appreciate your time with us.
Thank you. I will give me a second
Although
to
you're still
transition to my
here.
next item.
You're still here. Thank you,
Yes.
Ben. We appreciate, welcome.
Yes, this is one of those and now for my next trick sort of deals.
Yeah, exactly. We're on to item C, solid minerals lease in Logan County.
Okay. And now with this one, do you see my slides as you would expect to see them?
Yes.
Excellent. Good morning again, commissioners. This is Ben Teschner again for the record, Solid Minerals Manager. This time talking very specifically about solid minerals. This is a proposed lease in Logan County for a sand and gravel mining operation to help support highway work on Highway I-76. This lease would be with Castle Rock Construction. who is one of the construction companies that does this work. And I have Travis Bell, I believe, online with us, should you have any questions related to the work for him. This is a short-term mining operation, lasting the actual mining part lasting less than a year. Reclamation likely lasting less than a year. Reclamation taking a little bit beyond that, a year or two beyond that, to make sure that vegetation and so on is properly established. But this is again is supporting Highway I-76 and making improvements to that road. I don't believe you guys drove out this section of I-76 to go to this particular board meeting, but if you have driven this section, it goes thumpity thump a lot on your vehicle, and is in dire need of some work. This lease is located in central Logan County and is on a standalone 640-acre section. If we zoom in on this a little bit, you can see the city of Sterling down here on the lower left, and I-76 moving from sort of southwest to northeast on this map. You can see the State Land Board has a lot of property holdings in this particular part of the world, but this section ringed in yellow is the one we're talking about today. It's important and ideally located for this project because right at this location, there is an exit off of I-76. So you can take material off of the State Land Board section and quickly get it to the construction project where it needs to be. This is a photo of not very far off of that exit, looking down the county road and the property on the right. This is roughly where the pit would be located. This pit would be less than 10 acres disturbance in total. And let's see. As part of standard process when staff considers a mining lease application, we reach out to a number of parties, as the board knows. Our ag lessee, Mr. Blau, I spoke with him, sent him a letter. He is okay with this project. Travis from Castle Rock Construction met with him on the property to discuss the project and help make sure that everyone was on the same page. Brace yourselves. Parks and Wildlife had no concerns with this project, which is maybe the first time that's ever happened in my 5 years here. There are no known cultural resources. However, in this lease will include doing a Class 3 cultural resources survey for the planned disturbed areas, just in case. And Logan County also provided no comments either. We charge a standard rent of $5 an acre, resulting in $3,200 per year. But as the board knows, rent is not really how the Solid Minerals program makes money. We would also charge a royalty of 74 cents a ton, which according to the Colorado Department of Local Affairs is the economic rate for this part of Colorado, and an advance minimum royalty of $12,000 a year. This is important because, should the project not go ahead or they mine less than we expect, the board still earns a minimum amount of money on this lease. That results in a minimum revenue of $15,200, going up to north of $30,000 if the amount of material Castle Rock Construction projects ends up being mined off of this property. And that would all be in year one. In years 2+, we would anticipate that Castle Rock Construction will move this lease into what we call reclamation only status, which makes the AMR go away, but they continue paying rent just while they're reclaiming the property. And as part of that, depending on the exact location of the pit, they're likely to trim down the lease area. So they're leasing a smaller acreage amount, not the full section. So we would expect $800 to $3,200 per year in years 2+ until the reclamation is complete. With all that, staff is recommending that the board approve this sand and gravel mining lease 116692 with Castle Rock Construction on 640 acres in central Logan County. And here's the board order for your convenience.
Thank you so much. Any questions or comments from commissioners? I think it's pretty straightforward. With that, we will open this to public comment. Nick, if we want to see if anyone out there has a comment.
You bet. Folks listening along online, if you'd like to make a comment on this item, please use the raise hand feature. I'll allow you a few seconds to get that figured out. In the meantime, did you see the size of the beetle that walked in the room?
Yeah.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Yes.
Lindsay rescued the beetle.
Mhm.
No raised hands, Commissioner.
Stewardship
Okay,
never
we'll go-
ceases.
Exactly, exactly. All right, with that, we'll need a motion in a second.
I move the board approves the solid minerals production lease 116692 as presented in our board pack.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion, Commissioner Probst, second, Commissioner Chavez. Let's call a vote. Commissioner Chavez.
That's a big yes.
Commissioner Clark,
Yes.
Commissioner Heath,
Yes.
Commissioner Probe,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. That motion passes 5-0. Ben, we're gonna miss you, but we must move on.
Thank you very much, commissioners, and I look forward to seeing the rest of the meeting.
Excellent. All right, we are on to item D, Excel Power Pathway Segment 4, Kiowa County. I know we have Mindy here.
I'll be here, but David will be leading the discussion. at the
Okay.
end.
I see David. David, we can see you.
Good morning, commissioners. Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Great. And you can see the slide?
yes.
So beautiful.
Great. So good morning, commissioners. David Rodenberg, and I'll be wearing my right-of-way program manager hat this morning. This is a final action item where staff is recommending that the board approve a revision that affects one parcel of right-of-way 116521. This right-of-way is related to segment 4 of Excel's Power Pathway project, and it was approved just a couple of months ago by the board at the April 2024 board meeting via the board leasing agenda. This is the report that includes various leases that require board approval. So it's not a separate agenda item, but the board is still approving it via our board leasing agenda. This right-of-way was originally identified to require board approval because the width was greater than 50 feet, the transmission line was greater than 245 kV, and because it did not follow the board's property line. However, there was a fourth reason which the board should have been aware of. So this recommendation will hopefully resolve that issue. It's a right-of-way conflict where the routing on one particular state trust land section is in lesser prairie chicken habitat, of which the board should have been made aware prior to making a decision. The recommendation includes approving the existing route and requiring a mitigation consideration payment. And Mindy Gotzegan, the board's conservation services manager, will present that in more detail shortly. So according to the leasing directives and the board's Lesser Prairie Chicken Stewardship Action Plan, the plan precludes approval of new rights-of-ways in focal area habitat, Lesser Prairie Chicken habitat, unless certain conditions are met or the board approves a waiver of this condition. This is why we are bringing this final action item to the board today. This situation falls outside of the scope of decision-making authority delegated to staff. When staff originally brought this right-of-way to the board, The Conservation Services Manager's review had not been fully completed yet, and I was aware of this. And the review occurred after the board's approval. At the time, the right-of-way program manager, myself, anticipated there would be some additional stipulations to be added to the contract, but did not anticipate that this was in LPC habitat. Typically, the stewardship review would have occurred prior to bringing this right-of-way to the board for approval. But this was a rare situation where the program manager, myself, decided to move it forward to help facilitate timing concerns. So in addition, I just want to let you all know that staff will be making a recommendation to change the right-of-way policy on a separate agenda item later today that, in addition to other things, will help avoid this type of situation from happening in the future. So please keep in mind that staff had been aware of the conflict when bringing this right-of-way to the board in April. Had we been aware, staff would have brought this right-of-way to the board for a decision as an individual item, like we are now, with the same recommendation for this particular parcel. So even though segment 4 includes parcels in Pueblo, Crowley, and Kiowa County, a total of 27 state trust sections, the parcel that is part of the discussion today is in Kiowa County, located approximately here. So first, I want to give the board a quick overview of Xcel's Power Pathway project. This project is a $1.7 billion investment to improve the state's electrical grid and enable future renewable energy development around the state, primarily in eastern Colorado, and will span 12 counties. This map shows the 5 segments along with a potential extension or 6th segment, which is this down here. The board has approved the project on state trust lands as it relates to segment 1, which is this segment up here, which included 12 state trust parcels, segment 2, which is located here, which included 3 state trust parcels, and then segment 3, which included 1 state trust parcel. And then finally, segment 4, which is what we're talking about today, which includes 27 state trust parcels. But again, the main parcel we're talking about is located here. In addition, on all the segments that the board approved so far, they're going to receive approximately a little over $4 million for those rights of way. So now I'd like to hand it over to Mindy Gottsagen to give the board a more thorough understanding of the issue.
Thank you so much, David. I'm Mindy Gottsagen, the Conservation Services Manager for the State Game Board. And I want to go into what the Stewardship Action Plan required and a little bit a reminder about what that is. So Stewardship Action Plans are one of the board's, what I would call one of the premier tools. They involve non-contiguous lands, and they involve board-approved leasing decisions and directives to staff for all the land within a certain area. The Lesser Prairie Chicken Stewardship Action Plan is one of 3 that the board has approved. The board approves them once every 5 years. And these are developed by staff in conjunction with other agencies, in particular CPW, to take their recommended leasing stipulations and apply them kind of not necessarily ahead of time just to the properties, but what if new development comes in on these particular properties. As such, they save staff time and they save our lessees time. They know ahead of time what those leasing stipulations and directives would be. They also include an important component for habitat evaluation and enhancement. The board can still waive these leasing directives and stipulations, and at times staff does recommend that. But the issue here is that we want you to know about that. With stewardship action plans, I also include a review of these and any leasing impacts at the end of the year when we make our annual stewardship report. Kind of let you know how many times we've leased and or we waived features, how many times leasing issues have come up, and if there's any leasing impacts in terms of leases that we didn't do and what that financial impact would be. So with that background, I'll go into what happened here with the right-of-way leasing decision. And I'll just before you move on, David, those, the 4 lines of business, if you will, that typically are most involved with stipulations are the surface disturbing activities, because that's what really affects wildlife habitat. Is that typically involves oil and gas, renewable energy, both solar and wind development, solid mineral waste and rights of way. They typically don't involve leasing stipulations for grazing or for recreation or some of our other lines of business. Okay, David, can you go to the next slide? This map shows the current location of the location of lesser prairie chicken habitat. And as you can see, if you're familiar with our general pattern on the eastern plains of land ownership, this affects 6 counties in southeast Colorado. Slide, the most important habitat here, aside from the pink dots, which are the LEC locations, the current LEC locations, as mapped by CPW, and this data is all publicly available. It's on the ECMC website for high priority habitat. There's a kind of a lighter yellow, if you will. It's really where the dots are, where the LECs are. That's called the focal area habitat. After the LECs, that's the most important habitat. Then there are connectivity zones that connect them. And finally, that lighter green color is area where chickens do occur. It's where we expect them to be, but it's not the priority habitat. And so for, as you can see with the state land, with surface land pattern, we have 114 separate sections located in any of these 3 colors of habitat. It's about, the total is about 75,000 acres. This is a part of the state where we actually have transferred quite a number of our surface ownership. It's also where we still have that traditional checkerboard pattern. And even though we have only 75,000 acres of surface ownership, we have about twice that much, 150,000 of mineral ownership. So the lesser prairie chicken leasing directives and stipulations that are in the stewardship action plan would still affect leasing of those subsurface minerals. Okay, David. Next slide. And so on a broad level, David just showed you where that one parcel is within a broader habitat. This next map shows the close-up location, and that one section is the one that we're talking about today. Excel segment 4 right away goes along the southern border. What this map does not show is both segment 4 and the extension that are not on state trust lands. They actually will meet at a substation right where that left is. That pink dot is where 3 of those segments are going to come together. They're mitigating that impact through the Fish and Wildlife Service requirements. Our focus today is just on the one section with that small arrow pointing to it, and that's in focal area habitat. Okay, next slide, David. So the lesser prairie chicken stewardship action plan calls for right-of-way leasing. And what it says is that it does allow rights of way in the other 2 kinds of habitat, the connectivity zones and estimated occupied range. But it said that no new rights of way will occur in the focal areas, except if 4 conditions are met. And David, can you go through those just one at a time? One, if there's a nominal or incidental effect on the lesser prairie chicken populations or habitat. If it can be co-located with existing rights of way. If there's a compelling reason for the right of way, which I think there is a compelling reason, but it also needed to be designed to minimize temporary disruptive habitat, impacts to the habitat. And finally, the last one, if an exception prevents implementation of a more detrimental alternative to lesser prairie chicken. So in determining whether this right-of-way alignment did that, staff consulted with Colorado Parks and Wildlife Energy liaisons for this area, and they felt that these exceptions weren't made, that they had made recommendations to address to co-locate their way to the right-of-way a little bit north along another existing transportation corridor and right-of-way corridor. That was not done. And so they said, we really don't feel that this right-of-way location meets any of these 4 exceptions. But then why do we do that? So the next slide shows you that we still felt that this location was, although not preferred, was acceptable for leasing. And that relocating the right of way at this time would be exceptionally challenging to excel. Additionally, the shifting the right of way off state trust land would result in lost revenue for the state land board and still have created impacts. Even if they moved it slightly off of our land onto the private land below, we still have the impacts, there'd still be the impacts to Western Prairie Chicken, but we would receive less revenue. And so staff continues to recommend board approval, albeit a little reluctantly, but we wanted to add an additional contract requirement. And that is recommending adding a right-of-way contract requirement, a supplemental mitigation consideration. To further offset the 278 acres of impact to the western part of the focal area habitat. That number of 278 acres was determined using the federal guidelines, or those guidelines that were developed in collaboration with the Lockwood Plan, the 2013 Lockwood Plan that looks at what kind of impacts are caused by what kinds of infrastructure on that property. It extends just about 0.4 of a mile out from that size right away. That value, that acreage is calculated only on our land and not the private land to the south. But using that guideline, we felt that would be the number, the amount of acres of both direct impact of the right of way footprint and the visual, the impact of the tall structure that very much influences where Western Prairie Chicken are going to go. These funds would be used by Colorado Parks and Wildlife for Western Prairie Chicken habitat in Colorado within the same general habitat area. The next The second time we're doing this, adding an additional requirement for mitigation beyond what may be required by the federal review agency. The Stewardship Action Plan does say that we require mitigation. We don't need to be silent on how that would happen because there's a number of alternatives. I'll talk about what we came up with here. We determined that we decided to set a consideration amount that we would ask Xcel Energy to pay in addition to whatever they may have to pay to the Fish and Wildlife Service. And looking at what that fee might be, we looked at the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Habitat Mitigation Fee. That value is anywhere from $1,250 per acre to $13,750 per acre. After that higher number, $13,750, Parks and Wildlife, and that's for 11 acre impact. We're talking 278 acres. Parks and Wildlife typically meets independently with the developer and negotiates that value. And then those funds are paid to a mitigation fund that Colorado Parks and Wildlife uses within the same habitat area. Staff also looked at the Western Prairie Chicken Conservation Bank. It's a federally approved commercial conservation bank. The only one that exists right now is in the state of Kansas. They're currently charging about $2,500 per acre. And currently, right now, all those impacts that are happening, not just caused by the new renewable energy development. To date, staff understands that all of that funding and all of that mitigation is being met in Kansas, even though the impacts are happening in Colorado. And the state may have looked at determined that a reasonable, if not quite conservative value for this supplemental wildlife mitigation fee, or this consideration would be about $360 an acre. For that 278 acres, that would total about $100,000. Well, actually, it would be exactly. Staff feels this is still quite conservative. It's the first time we've assessed mitigation consideration of this amount. And there's some argument for going higher. I did have very good conversation with the science team lead with Fish and Wildlife Service, Heidi Nichols, about how the federal mitigation fees vary from what other states may add. The state land office in New Mexico is considering additional mitigation consideration also, state-based one. The federal mitigation assessment is based clearly on the guidelines and sideboards set out by the Endangered Species Act. It only captures particular kind of impact, which is a take. There are many other impacts that occur that these thoughts could be used to offset. So staff decided, well, that this lower value is lower because it reflects that the Fish and Wildlife Service is already going to assess their own mitigation fee. And then secondly, these fees, which will be used by Colorado Parks and Wildlife, they won't involve the highest standard of a commercial conservation bank. When you have a federally approved commercial conservation bank, there's three important components that set the bar as one of the highest standards for mitigation, and that is the enhancement of the habitat occurs prior to the impact. They don't get credits unless they have that standard. There's a permanent conservation easement involved. And finally, there's often, and almost always, permanent endowment fund that's set up in perpetuity to manage those lands, to maintain the standards. We don't know what that, at this time, what that additional consideration that we're recommending will be applied for. Staff is recommending that CBW utilize that through a wording. I don't know if it's support, but if we were to accept that and use the mitigation funds, first of all, it takes staff time and effort to do that. It would also, let's say, we'd have to use it on the very same property that the impact occurred on. We feel that the impact on that property is already so high because of the width and the size and height of that right away. It really makes sense to find a better project in that general habitat area. CPW already has a process, they have the accounts set up to do that, and are very willing to pay for this. So while our stewardship action plan requires mitigation, it doesn't say how it has to happen or necessarily. Are there any questions about this process or about all the stuff I just said?
Commissioner Heath?
Minnie, I have a question about the mitigation. Is that ongoing? I mean, how do we know it will continue to be protected?
Well, for the conservation bank, we know it'll be protected because it's a permanent conservation easement and that endowment fund. What Colorado Parks and Wildlife is doing, they have a range of options on how they can buy those funds. One of the things that they're hoping to do is to buy a ranch and put a conservation easement on it and manage the grazing on that so that it benefits Western Prairie Chicken, just like the one we saw yesterday, the Fox Ranch, is benefiting the greater prairie chicken. They would likely put a conservation easement on that, but those are questions we don't have right now. So there's more uncertainty with this process. And that's this lower fee kind of recognizes that. There's other things that they could do to remove fencing, habitat improvement, and there's a range of ways that they could use those funds. And by directing those funds to CPW, we're putting that in their hands to make those decisions.
Question on what the feds have in mind. You know, the two lines are coming together very close to the left, right? So that's going to be a huge mitigation. Are the feds thinking of getting a bank set up?
Well, the feds, the Fish and Wildlife Service has approved a bank in Kansas.
So it's in Kansas right now, but I don't have Colorado.
Right, there are a number of companies, including the state landlord is working with one to develop a commercial bank in the state of Colorado.
Right.
So it's there, any one of those would probably be at least a year out.
Right, but at least the dollars stay in the impacted area.
Right.
Which is
And one thing about the map, and you have a copy of it in your packets, the Western Prairie Chicken exists in a couple of different locations. Every one of those crosses state borders, and the chickens don't care, right? But, and so the mitigation funds are being used in Kansas. It's not that far from the Colorado line. It's still benefiting this type of ecoregion that Colorado prairie chickens live in, the grassland and sand sage. There are other types of ecosystems in Texas and Mexico and Oklahoma that are a little different. It is benefiting that. And ideally, I think if there had been commercially approved bank in Colorado, that those funds could have stayed here. Recognizing that we don't have that, it is a bit of a bitter pill that those monies are going to be Kansas.
Yes, your recommendation, these would go to CPW for application.
In Colorado.
And $100,000 to the sort of scope of all of this is somewhat minor, but it's a start. And I guess my other question is, so there are, well, $1.7 billion and many, many other rights of way in place. And sort of reversely, if we said no, and it is forced to jog and go around us, the impacts multiply, right? And the owners may or may not assess mitigation fees that could at least help offset something. Correct.
Now, the Fish and Wildlife Service will mitigate it. And I will say that the northern alignment of segment 3 does go through Lesser Prairie Chicken Habitat, but not the focal area. It goes through the productivity zone and the estimated occupied range. And that's why that's why we brought this one back to you. Because we wanted you to know about it. Normally, under a board, this would have probably still gone on the Board of Leasing agenda, but there would have been a no underneath it, we already went. But not, we wanted to come back to you through the other conflict.
Yeah. My thinking was following Commissioner Probst a bit. I can still remember April 2024. But both that we're going to benefit a little bit from the Kansas bank with trickle down impacts, positive impacts on chickens here. And secondly, if it's not our property, at least we have some control and oversight of this from my perspective, which I think is probably better than any rerouting that might make this a little bit more of a vulnerable question to the Lesser Prairie chicken mitigation efforts. I also appreciate staff bringing this back because I know you're probably like, really? Did you do that? But the due diligence that you all have exerted in bringing this forward to us, I really do appreciate because it's a conversation that we should have and that we need to have today. So thank you with that too.
The next slide, I think, is the staff recommendation. Right, and I don't necessarily want to read this, but basically that the board approve the revision for the right way 116521 for the section 36, section 19 south, range 46 west, and Lesser Prairie chicken focal area habitat, and require a $100,000 supplemental mitigation consideration paid to Colorado Parks and Wildlife to be used to enhance Lesser Prairie chicken habitat in Colorado. The next slide is question slide. We've already kind of done. And then the last slide is the goal.
Okay. Very good. Appreciate that.
And I don't know, the conversation with Excel.
That was my question.
Yeah. So they're aware of the meeting today. They did have a lot of questions about it. They were concerned about this being a double mitigation fee. We felt it's an additional fund. Price on this one section is higher. And it's used to offset impacts of a different time. From the service as required.
I appreciate that. That was my question, is communication with Excel. Okay.
I don't know if they're planning to extend any comments.
Okay. Any further questions or comments from commissioners on this agenda item? I am not seeing any. Let's open this to public comment, and then if Excel is on and would like to comment, they do so. So Nick, if you'd like to help with that.
Folks listening along online, please use your raise hand feature to speak to the board on this matter. I'll wait just a few seconds.
I just wanted to add that
Hand raised from,
Yes, David?
sorry to interrupt. I was just gonna say that Excel did reach out and say that they were gonna be available for questions, but they didn't necessarily need to present anything.
There. Okay, very good.
we have one hand raised from Tiffany Henning. Tiffany or Hennig. Tiffany, I promoted you to status where you can address the board if you wish. You be in control of your mic and your camera. Maybe we can hear you, I think.
Hi, sorry. This is actually Jen Chester. I came in through Tiffany's link because she was able to get that to work earlier. I am the senior manager of siting and land rights here at Excel Energy. As mentioned, we did have a discussion with staff, both Mindy and David, regarding the proposed additional fee here for mitigation. As Mindy stated, this is not a fee that we're necessarily in favor of. It is double paying to mitigate impact to the same land that we're required to mitigate with, well, actually voluntarily mitigate with the Fish and Wildlife Service. Understand, of course, the interest and concern in keeping dollars in Colorado. If there was an option to do that with the Fish and Wildlife Service, that was something we would have explored. However, those mitigation banks, frankly, just don't exist in Colorado, as noted. We have a responsibility and a requirement to be thoughtful about the dollars that we spend, our ratepayer dollars, and our obligations to keep and provide affordable electricity. I understand that $100,000 does not seem like much in the scheme of things on a big project. However, $100,000 at a time becomes a lot. And so in an instance where we are clearly being asked to double pay for impacts, it is something that we would not want to do. In terms of the routing of the line, I don't think it's necessarily correct to categorize that we could have moved the line to somewhere else but chose not to mitigate this impact. We worked with a lot of folks to get to the line on the map today to balance a lot of things that we had to consider in selecting that location, including moving it to where we were asked to move it by CPW, placing it significantly closer, miles closer, in fact, to the Sand Creek Massacre National Historic Site, which is one of the factors we had to consider. In terms of paying the fee, assuming that we move forward here and the $100,000 is required for us to utilize this right of way. Another concern we have is that there's no definition on where the dollars will be spent or how, other than to say they'll be in Colorado somewhere for something. We would like a better understanding of how and where the $100,000 will be used to mitigate the impact. As noted, we're paying a significant amount for banks in Kansas, and we know exactly where those dollars are going and where that habitat will be and what that quality of habitat is and how that money will be used. It's our understanding that we will not be granted the ability to use this right of way without the mitigation fee, or that if we protest too much, that that'll be a consideration. So just wanted to share those thoughts with you, but definitely concerned about double paying here and double paying without definition on where that $100,000 will be used.
Thank you. Appreciate that perspective, Ms. Tester. Ed, I wondered that same question about, since we approved this in April, does this impact that decision in a substantive way where now that decision is not held unless we do this on this particular, in this particular area?
It sort of depends a little bit on what you decide to do. I think what staff has recognized is that the full situation wasn't presented
right
with the normal conditions in April, and therefore the board has some options about how it wants to proceed. I think those options are probably to proceed without taking any further action and operating under the board decision in April. Another option would be to reconsider and and rescind the approval from April altogether. And then another option is to basically require the additional consideration, given the recognition that there are other factors that change the value and the valuation of the property that's involved. And still grant the right of way along the alignment, but achieve a different consideration amount than what was originally presented. And procedurally, that could be handled either just by requiring the additional consideration or rescinding the April grant and re-granting. I think in general, all those are procedural options that can't be entirely certain, but I don't think there's a procedural hiccup as long as we know what the board wants to do.
Why don't you say we amended it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. Commissioner Heath?
It seems like a reasonable question about how and where the mitigation will be done. How can we respond on that?
I think it would take a month to find out, and we staff to find out and report back to the board. We have to check the CBW. They normally keep a list of projects that they have, that they're either working on or proposing, and I could see, that they would most likely use that for. And then report back to the board. And to accept.
I wouldn't want to hold up our decision today
Right.
based on that discovery.
What if we did something, and I would be in favor of approving this board order on the supplemental mitigation consideration pending, I guess, recommendation on the review that the stewardship program has done, so that we could make the decision today and make sure it's not held up unnecessarily. At the same time, it would give you maybe a month to review that. And I'm assuming then it wouldn't need to come back to us if it's satisfactory.
Or just require that staff provide that information to itself. So,
All right, I'm happy with that as well. I don't know if there's a timing on that, but if so, if that's appropriate, I'm prepared to move
Yeah,
forward.
I think that accountability for dollars is kind of important.
I do.
So then Excel can also say, this money was used for these things,
Right.
that are directly impacting this particular species, and I think
Right.
that
A
is
separate
probably
one, I guess,
appropriate.
I would ask the question, why doesn't Colorado have a mitigation bank?
well, there are 3 separate companies working on that right now.
Okay,
Yeah, we're just not there yet.
The bank that's in Kansas was actually approved in either in or like around the 2013 timeframe. When, the Westerberg chicken was listed as threatened. It was delisted as threatened based on the court case. And then it was just recently relisted as threatened last year.
okay,
And so during that time when it wasn't listed, the no plans developed.
okay.
So there's activity in Colorado now. Including the one in Golden State.
Okay. So Madam Chair, I'm prepared to offer a motion.
I just checked in with Ed on, I just want to be transparent in that I do have an Excel board member as a trustee of my organization. We've never talked about this issue. Frankly, we work with larger issues, it's a multi-state entity, obviously, and we're working on larger, broader issues at a national level more frequently. So I just want to be upfront around this. I've never had this conversation. In fact, I've never even had power pathway conversation with my board member, but I want to let you all know that we do have that held on our trustee list. And Ed thinks I'm fine to vote.
Right, so acknowledging that information, Madam Chair, I move that the board approve the Excel Power Pathway segment for right-of-way 116521 as contained in our board packet, noting the supplemental mitigation consideration and asking that staff report to Excel how and where the mitigation will be done.
And do we still have Aaron online?
Yes, I'm
Aaron, are you up there?
Okay, good. We just couldn't see you for a minute. Okay, very good. That we have a motion. Is there a second?
Right.
Yes.
Offer, I guess, an amendment to
Yes.
this motion in that, the clarity for going to giving, Excel the information about how the funds are intended to be spent by CPW and not tying it necessarily to mitigation specifically. There may be another term for what they're doing with the funds in support of prairie chicken.
So what would you?
Get back to get back to Excel on how CPW intends to use the funds in support of prairie chickens. Not necessarily mitigation, actual mitigation spending versus, other support.
Yeah.
And that changes this, it is mitigation consideration and the.
Okay.
Yes,
If
you
you're
can
gonna
use
use
the
it on
term,
mitigation, then I'll let it go.
right, you can use the term as a verb to mitigate, it doesn't have to be spent on mitigation. And so
That's what I was doing. Okay, withdraw the amendment.
All right, we're
It
good to
doesn't
go.
appear to be a problem.
And that is a second from Commissioner Probe. Let's call a vote. Commissioner Chavez,
Yes.
Commissioner Probe,
Yes.
Commissioner Heath,
Yes.
Commissioner Clark,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes, that passes 5-0.
And
All right, we are
it'd be
moving.
interesting to report back to us too.
Yeah, I think we would like to hear that
yes.
list as well. And any progress towards Colorado's own effort. We're gonna stick with David, and continue talking about rights of way with the policy review. We're on item E.
Can you guys see my screen okay?
Yes.
Great. So good morning, Commissioners. David Rodenberg again, right-of-way program manager. This is a final action item to recommend that the board approve the revised right-of-way policy and the board's right-of-way pricing guidelines. So staff believes the recommended changes to the right-of-way policy, as outlined in the board packet, will ensure a more thorough review process and will be more in alignment with other lines of business program policies. So the State Land Board accommodates, this is the mission statement in our right-of-way policy. The State Land Board accommodates rights-of-ways on state trust land in a manner that minimizes encumbrances while preserving long-term real estate value and protecting natural values, allowing multiple uses and achieving appropriate returns. The main point here is that we do not necessarily promote rights-of-ways on state trust land, but when the board decides to accommodate them, it's important that all these things are achieved. In addition, it's important to understand that once a right-of-way is approved and executed, that they are essentially there for the long term. Our leases are for 30 years. They have 30-year terms on them, with the exception of public roads, which are perpetual. But many of these are expected to be renewed after that 30-year term. The term is meant to give the board the ability to revisit the right-of-way and collect an additional consideration payment, and to make sure it's still in use from just a management standpoint. So the policy was adopted in 2013. It was last reviewed in April of 2021. And as the board's aware, we revisit our policies every 3 years, and this is the third year review. So prior to presenting staff's recommended changes to the policy, I wanted to present to the board what the right-of-way portfolio looks like. So the board presently has a total of 3,047 rights-of-way on state trust land, some dating back more than 100 years. The board's right-of-way contracts consist of one of 6 different subtypes, and these are transportation, which is public roads or railroads, energy, which includes oil and gas pipelines, natural gas or oil, water and sewer, which includes water and sewer pipelines and ditches, power, which includes electrical transmission and distribution lines, communication, which is telephone and fiber optic lines, and then lastly, a miscellaneous category that's sort of a catch-all, which includes things like reservoirs, school sites, CDOT maintenance facilities, etc. So I'm just going to display the numbers in each of these categories to give you an idea of where the amount of right-of-ways in each of these categories. So transportation, 875 contracts out of the 3,000, 739 are in energy, 528 are in water and sewer, and 502 are in power, 268 under communication, and then finally 135 contracts in the miscellaneous category. So this table represents the last 5 years of rights-of-way business that the board has done. The board has issued 175 rights-of-way contracts over this 5-year period. And this table shows the breakout of number of contracts per subtype over that 5-year period. As you can see, over half of the right-of-ways issued in total and annually were either in the energy category here, and the power category here, which is electrical transmission and distribution lines. So there are 4 main reasons that rights-of-ways are brought to the board for approval. There's others in the policy, but these are the ones that typically are why rights-of-ways are brought to the board. It's because the width is greater than 50 feet. The right-of-way did not follow property lines. The voltage is greater than 245 kV on the power transmission lines, and it's a public road. So of the total 175 right-of-way contracts that were issued over the past 5 years, 148 contracts were approved by staff in accordance with the terms and authority delegated under this policy. These 148 rights-of-ways were reported to the board via the staff leasing report. So it's not asking for approval on those, it's just a report so the board's aware of the business that we're doing with rights-of-ways. The remaining 27, which is about 15.5% of those total 175, were brought to the board for approval either via the board leasing agenda or as a standalone agenda item, because the terms fell outside of the policy of staff authority. The board leasing agenda, as you guys are aware, is a report that contains numerous leases that the board approves all at once. Leases or contracts are put on the board leasing agenda when the reason for requiring board approval is fairly common. So because of those sort of common issues that the board sees, we initially started out reporting each one of those to the board as a separate agenda item, but ultimately moved them to the board leasing agenda report. So staff believes the current policy terms and related delegation of authority is appropriate, but we wanted to make sure that the board was aware of the types of rights-of-ways being issued and the amounts that staff was approving versus the amounts that the board was approving. And if the board was still comfortable with that setup and our policy. So before I move forward with the actual policy change recommendation, I just wanted to know if the board has any questions or comments or thoughts about the portfolio and the policy.
I am not seeing any, David.
Okay. So I'll move on to the recommended change. So currently, all rights-of-ways are reviewed by the program manager and the district manager, and then other staff are included when deemed appropriate. While that process has worked well, staff is recommending that all rights-of-ways are reviewed by all program managers, the stewardship trust manager, and the appropriate district manager. The benefits of this Will ensure that potential conflicts are identified. It'll be consistent with other lines of business programs, and it'll provide clarity and alignment with other policies as well. So lastly, the State Land Board, I wanted to talk about the pricing guidelines that the State Land Board has. So the pricing of rights of ways are either charged on a per rod basis or 100% of land value. And the per rod basis is a chart that we've created that has specific values depending on the width of the right of way and the type of right of way. So many of our rights of ways are in areas where the land value is $400 to $1,500 per acre, for example, and where the highest and best use is agricultural use. So when using the per rod method, our lowest rate equates to about $4,488 per acre. For transmission lines, the rate is a bit higher at $5,016 per acre. That's the translation from the per rod charge to a dollar per acre amount. So in these situations where the land value is $400 to $1,500 per acre, the State Land Board is receiving 3 to 11 times the value of the land. In areas where the land is higher than $5,016 per acre, then the 100% of land value method overrides the per rod method. In addition, the State Land Board charges for each use within a right of way. So the State Land Board receives additional revenue when multiple uses are within that same right of way. The State Land Board also charges 50% surcharge in situations where the right of way does not follow the property line, and staff recommends and the board approves that route. So it's not the section line, but the property line. And then lastly, the board charges an assignment consideration charge when an entity wants to assign the right of way to another entity, which is based on a percentage of the current market value and the age of the right of way. So multiple ways where the board's receiving revenue for these things. So with that, staff feels that the board is being compensated appropriately, and we have no recommended changes for the pricing guidelines. And with that, staff recommends that the board approve the proposed modifications and revisions to the right-of-way leasing policy and the board's right-of-way pricing guidelines as outlined in the cover sheet. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Yep, Mr. Chavez.
David, at the end of a lease of 30 years, let's say, when do you start talking to the lessee about a new rate, or is it renegotiating?
Yeah, we send out a notice, a letter, expiration letter notice to the right-of-way holder. And then they respond back to let us know whether they're interested in renewing it or whether it's no longer used. And then we go down the path of making sure that the use is either removed or abandoned. If it's an underground pipeline, a lot of times they plug and abandon. So we have that communication, and if they're interested in renewing, we use the current pricing guideline structure and set up another contract for another 30 years.
Thank you.
And I'm assuming with this new policy, we're putting into practice a process that would have helped with our issue that we just grappled with.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It wouldn't have given me the latitude to skip that and get board approval prior to issuing or asking a recommendation from the board. But I just want to make a point that it was this would have been found out regardless, because we weren't skipping the process. I did it after board approval. So our new policy will prevent that from happening.
Yeah. I appreciate that. And I think generally you all were following that practice anyway, so it was a little bit, unusual that was missed regardless, but putting this in a policy is probably just best practice.
Exactly.
Any other questions or comments? I don't see any from commission members. Nick, if we want to open this item up to the public.
Yeah, members of the public, if you'd like to address the board on this item, please use the raise hand feature on your screen and we'll allow you to address the board. Speaking of wasting a few seconds, if you were riding around all day yesterday, snoozing comfortably as your drivers navigated across soapy roads and kept you safe, just a special shout out. Thanks.
Yes.
To drivers from yesterday.
Yes.
It's a long day of driving, indeed.
Nobody ended up in a ditch. So.
Nope. Always a plus.
No raised hands.
Okay, we do have a board order in our packet. If we could have a motion and a second.
Commissioner Chavez, I move we approve the policy review for rights of way 300-002 as described in the board package.
And do we have a second?
You can second.
Commissioner Chavez, with the motion, Commissioner Probe with the second, we will call a vote. Commissioner Chavez?
Yes.
Commissioner Probe?
Yes.
Commissioner Heath?
Yes.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, that passes 5-0. Thank you, David. We're going to move on to the June board leasing agenda. Do we have Andy or will Nick be Andy today? All right, wonderful.
Commissioners, we've been spending so much time in the last few minutes talking about the board leasing agenda. Transactions and Record Services Manager. I'm Nick Massey, Assistant Director for the record. And this month, we're presenting a board leasing agenda with 13 items on it. 8 competitive bids, 5 new leases for your consideration. As a reminder, the reason these things exist within the board leasing agenda is because they are items that fall outside of delegated authority from between board and staff or staff action. But they don't necessarily raise to a level of individual action items because they tend to be run of the mill, for lack of a better phrase. There are certainly items in there that can catch your attention from time to time, and so we have staff available to discuss any questions that you might have about the board leasing agenda. If there are no questions this time around, we would welcome a motion to approve those items in consent, sort of a consent agenda.
I wish I didn't have a question because it's time to go, but I do. On item 5 of the leasing agenda, I found it very confusing, and so I'm trying to understand. Although the lessee didn't meet or exceed the bid and didn't meet the requirements of the 118 rights, staff still finds as between the two candidates that the existing lessee fits the lease, but I note that their AUM rate was quite a bit lower than the competition, so I wondered if somebody could shed some light on that.
I'd like to point out that William Molson is on the call. William, would you like to take some comments on that?
Yes, happy to, Nick. Can you hear me?
We can.
So I believe the question was, why did we make the choice on this competitive bid that we did? Number one, I'd like to state the competitive bid application was received on one portion of the one section of the lease, which was contained in a total of about 4 sections. So the bid that was, when the bid was received, the existing lessee chose not to match the bid, but did go ahead and place a higher, their own competitive bid on against the one section that we received a competitive bid on. Therefore, that moved the application process into our competitive process. Through that process, although the competing bidder did place a higher rate, bid rate on the lease, through our competitive bid process, we felt that the group felt that the existing lessee scored higher in continuing education. They scored a little bit higher in stewardship of the land, although both of the parties exhibited good stewardship on the lands that they were managing. Does that answer your question?
Sort of, yes, the clarifying, note that you made that that the competitive bid was on one section out of 4, so there's the implications on outcomes and management, et cetera, if you were pulling one piece out and then releasing the rest to the existing lessee. I mean, is that a primary consideration as well?
That was part of it. But as I would say again, through our evaluation process, given stewardship, continuing education, for instance, the existing lessee had taken part in both our lessee forums as well as outside educational processes, so they gained some point advantage there over the competing bidders, sorry, who did not have any educational, they didn't gain any points there because they hadn't attended any adaptive grazing management educational schools during the last number. They didn't indicate that they had ever done that. So it was the overall score that did outpace the higher bid from the competing applicant. Sorry.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions or comments from commissioners? I am seeing none. Nick, let's open for public comment.
Members of the public, as this is a board voting item, you have the ability to address the board with your comments. If you'd like to do that at this time, raise your hand virtually using the tools provided by Zoom. And we'll bring you up. No hands are raised, Commissioner.
All right, with that, we will need a motion in a second. Does anyone want to approve the board leasing agenda for June? I will move that we approve the board leasing agenda for June 2024 as presented in our packet.
I'll second it.
We have a motion from the chair, second Commissioner Chavez, Commissioner Chavez,
Yes.
Commissioner Frobe,
Yes.
Commissioner Heath,
Yes.
Commissioner Clark,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes, that passes 5-0. And we are on to minutes from our May board meeting. Anyone have any changes to the minutes? We will show the minutes as approved by acclamation. And with that, we conclude our time in Ray, Colorado. And we'll adjourn our meeting. And once again, thanks to everyone. Nick, thanks for navigating the rather difficult technology issues today. And again, appreciation to everyone who met with us yesterday and for all the work going into our workshop and tour.